Tuesday is election day in Nebraska, and here's what you need to know if you're headed to the polls or if you're bringing back one of those early ballots. First, you're going to see lines that look longer than they really are. Because of social distancing rules during the coronavirus pandemic, you're likely to see lines that look like they might take more time than they really will. Now, understand you're going to have to bring your patients to the polls too, because they will be wiping down voting stations to try and keep them sanitized between voters. But lines that look like they're out the door might not be quite as long as what they look because of 6 feet between each voter. Now, one thing that folks are trying to stress in our local health departments is to wear a mask. They'd like you to do that, but there is no way to require one in Nebraska, and that includes in Omaha, where you have a local ordinance requiring masks in most circumstances. Because they cannot disenfranchise voters and keep them from the polls, you're going to have to wear one on your own if you want one, and you're going to have to accept that folks might not. The main thing is that if you forget yours in the car, don't worry about it. Election officials say they're going to have some masks available, single-use masks, for folks if they need them in the lines. At the polls, now one thing to remember, in Nebraska, the polls are open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. The thing that you need to know is if you're getting off work late or if you forget, as long as you are in line by 8 p.m., you're going to get your vote. You're going to get your chance to vote. The key here is to make sure that you're in line, and that's the same for early voting as it is for at the polls. If you're in line at a drive-up box, the county will have observers there to know who was in line by 8 p.m. And if you were in line to return it, they'll let you finish no matter how long it takes to get that through. Poll watchers. Now, there is a key thing to know. If you've been following news anywhere nationally, you know that there's a little bit of fear that there may be some folks out there trying to watch you vote. Nebraskans, I've talked to the Secretary of State, I've talked to local election officials, and they understand that there are rules for those observers. And if you were to see someone who maybe is a little intimidating, maybe goes over the line and tries to influence the way you vote, then you can report it to your local election officials, to the Secretary of State's office, or even to Civic Nebraska, which has its election protection hotline at 402-890-5291. What they want you to do is to let them know if someone's doing something that looks out of line. They'll take care of looking into it. Now, when you're actually got your ballots, this is a little bit of a Cliff's Notes here. Make sure that you look on both sides. This year in Nebraska, there are double-sided pages of the ballot. Make sure you look on both sides, even if those pesky judges aren't what you want to vote on. You still ought to look. Early ballots. If you want to make sure you return an early ballot, do not bring it to your polling place. It's not going to work. They're not going to be able to help you. For polling place, the polling places are for votes that are cast on that day, not for early ballots. If you requested an early ballot, you need to go to your county drop box in your home county, or you can head to your county election office, like in Douglas County. That'd be the Douglas County Election Commission at about 120th and Center. If you decided, for whatever reason, to request an early ballot and maybe aren't sure that you want to cast it as an early ballot and you'd rather go in person, you still have that chance. Although local election officials would prefer you just cast that early ballot. You can go to the polls and request a provisional ballot, but you have to understand that that provisional ballot will be counted long after many of your friends' ballots have been weighed. They have to wait and make sure that somebody doesn't try to turn in your early ballot, or that some folks who might be disingenuous try to vote twice. If they are able to see that nobody did vote it, then they'll count your provisional ballot, but it might take until mid-November for that to check in. Closing time. The key here, results. If you're really one of those people that needs to know how early on election night am I going to know when this election is done, this is probably not the election for you, especially in Omaha's more contested races, the presidential and the 2nd District House race between Don Bacon and Cara Eastman. Those races may be close enough, either of them or both, that you may need to wait until Friday to open any of the early ballots that were returned on Election Day. Douglas County has a little quirk where it won't open those early ballots turned in on Election Day until then. What that means is if there's a high number of provisional ballots and a high number of outstanding early ballots yet to be counted, then a lead of 300 to 400 votes might not be enough to call a race at the end of election night counting. So just keep your patience and understand that the vacuum of social media and what you're going to see on your uncle's Facebook feed and your aunt's Instagram doesn't necessarily mean it's true. If you want real information, tune into omaha.com and we'll take care of you. Thanks.